thank you for coming tonight. It's a beautiful night out there, and I know there's lots of other things going on, so I appreciate you being here. And thought you might be interested in hearing a little about the writing process, so I thought I would start with that, and then I will give you a little bit of background on my new book and talk about some of the themes that are in the book, as well as read a few passages. Then I thought I'd tell you quickly about the other books, my previous 3 books that I wrote, and then I'll take questions, if that sounds good to all of you. Okay. Oh, and I will be selling books afterward if anyone's interested. If you'd like to buy one, I'm happy to sign it. I also am experimenting with an email thing. So if you'd like to receive emails about if I've got a book coming out or an event coming up, it won't be very often. You can put your name down, and I would be happy to send you an email to keep you updated on what I'm up to. I've got little business cards back there, too, that will take you to my website. So I think that's all the housekeeping stuff. Okay, so the writing process. It starts, for me, with an idea of something that I want to write about, a topic I want to explore. And that burgeons into a main character. So with The Good Life, my first novel, I wanted to write about the concept of what the good life is and what it means in America. And I thought I'd do that with my protagonist, Ann Behrens, who's a wealthy Midwestern housewife who's married to the CEO of a chemical company, and she has a very definite idea of what the good life is. And it's basically a very materialistic, self-serving life. And that is going swimmingly for her. I'll tell you more about that book later. But that's what I wanted to explore in the first book. So that's where my books start, is with an idea. If you want to write a book, you need to sit down. Marilyn knows this. She's an author. You need to sit down and do it every day, or at least most days. You can take a day or 2 off here and there. So that's part of my writing process, is making sure, for me, it's between 8 and noon, Monday through Friday. I'm not always writing for 4 hours, but I try to dedicate myself to either writing or thinking about writing. I don't schedule doctor's appointments or social visits or other things in those morning hours. That's just the time that I'm writing. And then after the writing comes the even harder part. That's the editing and the revising. So I typically write 4 or 5 drafts of all my books, which is hard to do in a year period. I tend to, I work with a publisher who likes to have a book a year, and it's a pretty rigorous schedule. And the writing, even though it can be difficult, it's not nearly as difficult as the revising, because that's when you're trying to make the writing better, get the story right, use the right words. You want to avoid tired phrases that you've heard a lot. You want to write in a fresh way and in a clear way. We, as writers, have the stories in our head, but getting them down on paper and having everyone else who reads them understand them is a challenge. So the editing and the revising is the hardest part for me. And I write my drafts all the way through. So I'll write my first draft all the way through without stopping to go back and see what I've done the day before or the week before. And then I don't look at it all the way through again until the second time around. And then the second draft is actually the hardest one, because that's when things aren't quite lining up, and the character might have blue eyes in the first chapter and green eyes in the second chapter, and things like that. Inconsistencies happen, so you have to sort of clear that up the second time around. And then the third time, I think that's just getting the story sharper and better. And the fourth time is really polishing. And then after that, it goes off to my agent, and she's a really good editor. She reads it and gets back to me with comments on what she thinks of the book, and she's a really tough cookie. I love Loretta. She challenges me, she makes me work hard, so her comments are, and they're also dead on, I think. She's really astute in her reading and her suggestions, so she helps to make my books better. And then it goes off to the publishing house, and then it comes out in this form about 9 months later. So that's sort of how it works for me. It's a little bit about the writing process. So I will talk to you now about Every Other Wednesday, which is my latest book. It came out at the end of April and is published by Kensington Publishing. They've done all my books. And the idea for Every Other Wednesday, the topic I wanted to explore, I had kind of more than one thing going on with this one. So the three topics, the prominent topics in the book are guns. Ever since the shooting event at Sandy Hook, I wanted to write about guns. And I tried to do it in a balanced way in the book. So that's one thing in the book. Another thing I wanted to write about was a midlife crisis from the female point of view. We all have heard about the male midlife crisis. It's been sort of brought to light in movies and books, and it's the sports car and the younger woman and the sort of quit your job and go off and live in France or something. And I think women are much more practical creatures. And so the woman midlife crisis, I think, is looking forward rather than a sense of nostalgia or trying to recapture lost youth. They're looking forward and thinking, have I met my goals? How much time do I have? Do I even like the goals that I have? Do I have enough time to reach new goals, set new goals, and reach them? And so that's what's happening in this book as well, is that sort of examination of the female midlife crisis. And then the third one is mature women friendship. And I say mature women because I think women in their 50s, 60s, 70s have a very different kind of friendship than women in their 20s and 30s. And this is an exploration of women in their 50s, and they are more honest, I think, with one another. They're sort of more authentic. They're more comfortable with who they are. So that's the third thing that I'm examining in this book. And it's a lot. It's a lot to sort of take in. And the book can feel a bit chaotic at times, that there's a lot going on. But that was actually on purpose, because I think women in their 50s, especially stay-at-home mothers, who have their children are now gone, so the youngest one has left home, and it's commonly called the empty nest syndrome. And it's called that syndrome for a lot of reasons. I think women can be absolutely paralyzed at that time in their life if they've been a mother solely or mostly for 20 to 25 years, and now they're faced with this blank page. And they're often not sure what they want to do. They may want to go back to a job that they've had before, but they're afraid that it's moved just beyond their capabilities in 2 decades, and often it has changed quite a bit. They are just used to having their own schedule, and they ran their house sort of like clockwork, and then you go into an office and somebody else is the boss. And that's an adjustment. And so women, I think, are grasping at that age in terms of what they want to do next. It's a time that they say to themselves, who am I now? I was a mother for 25 years. I'm still a mother, but now I have this opportunity to do whatever I want, and it can be scary. So those are the three sort of themes that I worked with in the book. I thought I would read a little bit from the book for you, just introduce the three main protagonists. Has anyone read the book yet? Okay, I have too. All right, there's some of us. Okay, so I didn't want to read something that would give away too much. So Alice, Joan, and Ellie are the three women in the book, the three protagonists. And Alice is the mother of three girls. She and her husband own a running store called Fast Pace. And her youngest daughter has just gone off to the state university. In some ways, Alice did want to work. Having a job would give her something to do, a new purpose in life, now that her girls were out of the house. And on some days, she longed for something to fill and challenge her brain, not to mention the extra money that Dave mentioned regularly. But in terms of getting a job, she knew a lot more about what she didn't want to do than what she did want to do. She didn't want to work at Fast Pace, the running store she and Dave had opened 28 years ago, when they had moved back to Connecticut and when she was running as many miles a week as Dave. And she didn't want to perform menial labor, though she had to admit that what she had been doing as a stay-at-home mom, the grocery shopping, meal preparation, driving kids to lessons and school events, and running errands, all fit squarely into that category. Working women like to show their empathy by praising the honorable profession of mothers dressed in sweats instead of suits, by comparing the skill sets of the cookie baking, tantrum thwarting, coupon clipping moms to those of the team building, forward-thinking, solution-oriented corporate ladder climbers. But women at home knew better. If they were paid for what they did, it would be minimum wage. This had been okay with Alice, because in addition to performing banal tasks, she had been caring for her girls. But if she tried to join the workforce now, she would be qualified for nothing but boring, inconsequential labor to define her days. Joan is a banker's wife, and she has two daughters and a mother-in-law with very definite ideas about what her daughters-in-law should pursue when they're married to her sons. So the mother-in-law had a rule for her daughters-in-law that they could either be mothers or they could go to school if they wanted to pursue something, but if they were going to be mothers, they would have to stay home. So Joan and her husband have a little trouble getting pregnant, so Joan does go off and get a master's degree in mathematics, and then lo and behold, she gets pregnant, so she's been home for a long time. And she's been satisfied with that, but she also just has a yearning to do something else, so she's really thinking that I need to go back to work. I need something to fill my days now because I'm bored. So this passage it takes place when Joan, Alice, and Ellie, they have lunch every other Wednesday. That's where the title comes from. But they're up at the casino having lunch, and this is a scene that takes place right after that lunch. Joan had done all her errands that morning and was not yet ready to go home. Instead, she wandered in and out of several shops where she half-heartedly examined several pieces of merchandise: a pair of smart black heels, a hand-dyed silk scarf, an oversized cranberry-colored leather purse, before setting them down. 10 minutes later, she was on the casino floor. It was the same section she and Stephen had walked through on their way to the Cancer Society fundraiser. She could see the roulette tables in the distance. Why not? She asked herself as she crossed the room. She approached the same table she had been so successful at during the event and put 5 20s on the green felt surface, as if she did this every day, as if this behavior were normal for her. She ignored the flutterings of fear she felt in her heart and stomach. She disregarded the questions offered up by her mind. Instead, she settled into her chair, telling herself that what she was doing was fine. The croupier, a young Asian man with a gummy grin, pushed 2 short stacks of pink chips her way, and, without making eye contact, told her good luck. Just as she finished placing her first bet, a young waitress carrying a small circular tray and dressed in what Joan could only describe as a Pocahontas outfit, asked her if she wanted a drink. And Ellie, the last of the 3, she's actually 48 when the book starts, so she's not quite 50. But her youngest, she's got 2 sons, and the youngest son has just left the house. So Ellie has a part-time job, but it does not get in the way of her family life. It's what I would call kind of invisible to the family. She is a part-time bookkeeper, and she does it when the kids are at school, and now that they're gone, she's got an opportunity to figure out what she wants to do. She is someone who's a very giving person, a kind person, and she puts everyone in her life, her husband and her boys and her large extended family first. And now she's struggling with this notion of putting herself first. So in this passage, Ellie is thinking about her mother, her father, and her brothers, about their expectations of one another and about their expectations of her. It was not that Ellie was insecure. She simply did not possess the Kilcullen family confidence. She was not extroverted, like her brothers, lawyers, all of them, and father, a retired lawyer turned state senator. When they all walked into church on Sunday mornings, every head and every pew turned to watch the procession. It was a sight on many accounts. First, on any given Sunday, the Kilcullen clan numbered at least 20. Second, Ellie's older brothers were some of the most handsome men she knew. At church, they all dressed in blue blazers and subdued neckties, their wives every bit as attractive as their spouses, dressed in skirts and heels. And the children were outfitted like their parents, especially noticeable in an age when jeans were acceptable everywhere. While Ellie was not usually impressed by the peacocks in the world, she loved the pageantry associated with the arrival of the Kilcullens at church, and she loved her family. As the youngest and the only female, Ellie was coddled by her older brothers, always had been, as well as her family, her father, who still occasionally bade her to sit on his lap for a moment at family gatherings. Ellie's mother, Bridget, would admit to only her husband that she loved her daughter just a little bit more than her boys. After all, she had wanted a girl badly enough to have 7 children. But she did not, like the others, spoil Ellie. Bridget was wise, politically active, and deeply religious, and she expected her daughter to be the same. Okay, I'll tell you about the other 3 books. So I started to tell you about The Good Life, and Anne Behrens has this carefully crafted life that she's made for herself. She's an avid shopper. She's got a lot of disposable income. So she's an avid shopper. She's an avid exerciser. She diets constantly. Some of the women in town call her the Scarecrow. And she thinks she has it all. She's living the good life. She comes from a farm in Pennsylvania. She's a long way from that farm now. And she was an only child, and her parents, Eileen and Sam, still live on that farm. And she gets a call from Eileen, her mom, one day, and Eileen tells her that she can no longer handle or care for Sam, who has Parkinson's disease and dementia, by herself. So she's on the wait list for an assisted living facility, but in the meantime, she'd like Anne's help. And Anne thinks she just needs a check, so she'll get out her checkbook and write whatever check is needed. But Eileen says, well, no, I want to come live with you. And Anne at first thinks that's going to be fine. I've got the guest house out back. They can just live there. They can come over for Sunday dinners. Everybody's going to be doing their own thing. Well, that doesn't happen. Eileen is a very nurturing, loving mother to Anne, and she sort of steps in for Anne with Anne's children, Nate and Lauren, two teenagers who have been largely ignored by Anne. She's busy doing her thing, they're busy doing their thing. Eileen steps in with the grandchildren, as does Sam, who can be remarkably, or he can have remarkably lucid moments where he connects with especially Nate, the 16-year-old son. So they work their way into their lives, and I won't spoil the ending, but there's just that definition of the good life becomes blurred for Anne. A Changing Marriage, I should have brought them up here to show them to you. A Changing Marriage is the story of Karen Spears and Bob Parsons. They meet in college, fall in love, get married right afterward, and think, like all couples on their wedding day, that they're just going to have this fantastic life. And it does start out that way. And then life, as it does, intervenes. So Bob is doing really well at work, and he's getting promotions and accolades and lots of attention, and they decide to have children. And so Bob's at work, and Anne's home with the children. And she's not feeling satisfied. And Bob is going this way, and Anne is pretty much a single parent going that way, and their paths diverge. So it's a story about what can happen to a marriage if communication and compromise break down. So their marriage is changing, has changed. And then my third novel, The Summer Cottage, is about the Thompson family, and they have a house on the Connecticut shoreline. There's a father, a mother, and 4 children. Claire, the mother, is a former Olympic caliber swimmer, and as such, she is a very competitive woman and grew up in a very competitive atmosphere as a swimmer. And because this swimming made her, open doors for her back in the 40s and the 50s, when women were more second-class citizens than they are when the novel takes place, she thinks this kind of life would be good for her children. And so she pushes them, not only to do things, but sort of pits them against one another a little bit, and thinking that it will be good for them, that they will get the things that she got, that they will be stronger and better and smarter for it. And instead it kind of backfires. And so the kids all scatter, with the exception of Helen, the youngest, who is closest to her mom and ends up being her caregiver when Claire's cancer comes back. So Claire knows that death is looming, and she says to Helen, I want to see everybody again. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to call them all and invite them to the cottage and tell them if they want to be part of my will, they'll come for this weekend. Helen's like, I'm not doing that. But of course she does, because she's Helen. She's very good, and she's a dutiful daughter. And so this weekend of this cast of characters, they come back to the cottage. And there is some stuff going on. Thomas, the oldest, has not been to the cottage in 30 years. He's now living in Canada, has married someone, and brings his family, even though they don't know he's coming until the last minute. Charlotte is, I don't know, Ted, how do I describe Charlotte? Charlotte is a bombshell, and is chasing her lost youth. So she is very made up, has had plastic surgery, and she's 47, and she's got a 28-year-old boyfriend. So she brings her boyfriend to the cottage. And then Pammy, who is the one right above Helen, Helen's the youngest. Pammy lives in New York City. She has never been married, and she has just got a kind of chip on her shoulder about that, and just about life in general. So these are all the people who gather back at the cottage. And some bad memories and other things get stirred up, but also this sort of power of love that a family has. You know, there's something about the people who share your last name with you. You have that history, and they drive you crazy, but you love them through all of this. And so that kind of comes through in this book. This cast of characters comes together, and it's a family story. And the chapters go back and forth between 1973, when the four siblings were teenagers, and 2003 for this reunion. So that is the Summer Cottage. I think I've gone through my whole agenda.
You have a publisher where some of the other authors that we're seeing are self-publishing or doing it other ways. How did you go about getting a publisher for your books?
I think you have to get an agent. That's the first step. It's really hard. There are just so many writers out there who want to get their books published, and it's really hard to just send them off to a publisher and have that happen. So the easiest way to do it, even though it's really hard to accomplish this, is to get an agent. And then that agent will represent your work to various publishers, and they have an in. And it's a hard thing to get an agent. And what I finally did that worked is I read a book. I thought, oh, this is kind of like family relationship situations that I write about. Who's the agent on this? And I contacted her and said, oh, I read such and such a book. I enjoyed it. I write the same kind of books. Would you be interested in seeing mine? And she said yes. And it happened pretty quickly after that. But it's a hard thing to do. And self-publishing now is so available. There's so many different venues and vehicles to do it, and it's sort of more widely accepted than it was at first. So I understand why people do that. You get to choose your cover, you are in control of everything that's in between those two pages, you control your own marketing, but you also have to schlep your books all over the place, kind of like I did tonight. I have to do some schlepping too. But you have to sort of get your books in bookstores, and it's hard to do all that. You know, when you have a publisher, they get your books in bookstores all over the country, which is wonderful. So yeah, it's an agent is the way to go.
Making them into film?
No, I wish. It's so funny. Sometimes when I do sometimes have characters, just movie stars that you know, actors that you know all the time. You think, oh, that person would be good as Anne, or that person would be good as Eileen, or that person would be good as Joan. So I would love for that to happen. I don't know how to do that, and yeah. Any of you filmmakers out there, I'm interested.
On your books, they're very attractive.
Thank
but
you.
One of the things it's just a comment. One of the things I really like the most is I put discussion questions in there.
Yeah.
It's sometimes it's so hard to find questions when you're doing a book club or anything, and it's a very big help. Plus, also when people are reading, they can go back and kind of, read the questions.
Yes.
And figure it out.
Yes.
Just help.
I like doing that too, and doing book groups is one of my favorite things to do. To sit around, and I do this with some frequency, to sit around with 8 or 10 women who have read your book and to just talk to them about it and have them ask me questions about, well, what did you mean by this? I always learn something. And I think sometimes people are afraid to have an author come to their book group because they think, oh, I can't say anything bad. But one of my favorite ones when I came here, there was a woman who said, well, I didn't like the book. And I loved it that she said that. I mean, I was sad she didn't like the book, but I loved it that she said that. And I said, well, tell me more. And we just got talking about it, and we're very chummy at the end. And I sort of explained different things about why I did the ending the way I did, and it was really interesting. So I love to be challenged like that, and it just makes me think better and write sharper. So I really enjoy doing that, and I'm happy to do that for anybody. The library has 2 sets of, it's got maybe a dozen every other Wednesdays and a dozen the Summer Cottages that are meant for book groups, and I'm happy to do that, and I think it's really fun to do that. So keep me in mind if you're in a book group. Any other questions for me? Yes?
When you wrote this book every other Wednesday and you finished it, the synopsis of The Empty Nester, is there like 3 or 4 things that everyone has in common besides they need a new place or the emptiness? I'm sure there was things in your mind that at the end, the finale, that we all, our human condition needs.
In terms of empty nesters?
Our feelings, growth, the human condition.
Yeah, I do think empty nesters are really misunderstood sometimes. Women, can't speak for men, because I think if you've been with someone, if you've been with a husband, let's say, and that husband has watched you masterfully raise this household of children and get all the stuff done, and so that husband or partner thinks you can do anything. And so they're not always as supportive as you need. Your children are on to new adventures, and they're children. They really shouldn't be your support system anyway. And so it's these women, it's these mature women who know exactly how you feel. Like, I don't know what I want to do. I kind of want to work, but I kind of want to just do something for me. I sort of want to take a painting class, or I want to learn how to fly a plane, or I want a job, but I want something completely different from what I did before. How do I begin to do this in this global 24/7 world we live in now? So I don't know if there are any sort of universal truths there, but it's a real time of self-discovery for women. And I think once women push through the fear of what lies ahead for them, that it can be a remarkably satisfying time, because you are able to pursue your dreams. Did I answer your question? Okay. Any other questions for me? Yes.
It seems like you're on a very tight time schedule, having to come out with a book every year.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you keep coming up with fresh ideas? Do you keep a particular file? Or you're working on one right now.
Yeah.
You must already be trying to think about
I am already thinking about the next one. I've got a couple, so I have just a few things in my head. And the one for the next one, though, was not necessarily, and I don't even know if it's going to be the next one, but it came out of a conversation I had with my son like a week ago. And it's just been bumping around my brain since then. So as I said in the beginning with these ideas, they come from anywhere. It's you have to be able to make a 300-page book out of it. So there's got to be enough play in it and enough room for exploration that it can sustain that many pages. But yeah, so I'm always thinking about stuff. I don't pay enough attention probably to what's trending, right? I should have girl in the title of my next book because those are the ones that are all over the place now, and I should pay more attention to that. I have to think about that. But usually I write about what I want to write about and what I want to explore rather than maybe what I should be writing about commercially. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much. I'll go to the back table if anyone wants to come say hello.